Breaking news today. African peacekeepers in Ukraine and Russia. What did we accomplish? The trip to Ukraine and Russia by African leaders last week was hailed as historic by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who called it the first time African leaders have embarked on a peace mission beyond the continent. But did it make a difference, or was it just an attempt by Mr. Ramaphosa to secure attention on the global stage, amid mounting problems in South Africa, when neither warring sides agreed to peace talks? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin met with an African delegation last week, which included leaders and representatives from 7 countries. The trip, announced last month and led by Mr. Ramaphosa, had been expected to contribute to ending the war, which has had a significant negative impact on living standards across Africa. South Africa, Egypt, Senegal, Congo-Brazzaville, Comoros, Zambia, and Uganda all sent delegates to present a 10-point proposal, which included unimpeded grain exports and recognition of Russia and Ukraine's sovereignty. Other demands included a reduction in hostilities, an acceleration of peace talks, the release of prisoners of war, and increased humanitarian aid. South Africa claimed that Russia and Ukraine had agreed to keep talking, but on Saturday, Putin of Russia seemed to dismiss large parts of the plan. Ukraine showed the same lack of enthusiasm. Many African countries have experienced food shortages as a result of the conflict because they rely on Ukraine and Russia as their primary suppliers of grain and fertilizer. The result has been a worldwide increase in the cost of food, but particularly in Africa. According to the Africa Development Bank, the conflict is to blame for the continent's 30 million ton grain shortage. Ukrainian grain ships bound for Africa have been warned by President Putin not to expect a renewal of an agreement that allows them to pass through Russian-controlled ports on the Black Sea. Mr. Putin has made similar threats in the past, but if he follows through this time, it could exacerbate food shortages on the continent, something that African leaders would like to avoid at all costs. It is unlikely that Mr. Putin will follow through on his threat, however, because he needs the support of African countries to avoid diplomatic isolation. African leaders were met with increasing pressure to condemn the invasion as international attention was drawn to the war's devastating financial toll on the continent. The head of Ukraine argued that a condemnation of Moscow was necessary to show the Russian people that their president's invasion of Ukraine was the direct cause of international isolation for their country. As members of the African delegation, Uganda and South Africa are seen as being on the same side as Russia. The U.S. ambassador to South Africa said last month that the country had broken its neutrality by selling weapons to Russia. The South African government has refuted these claims. If Mr. Putin were to visit South Africa for the upcoming BRICS summit in August, it is also unclear whether or not South Africa would turn him over to the International Criminal Court. The primary goal of the trip was to advocate for a diplomatic resolution to the Ukraine conflict, but this objective has not been met. Ukraine and Russia reaffirmed their refusal to negotiate without meeting certain prerequisites both before and after the African peace mission. Ukraine wants its borders to be restored to their 1991 levels. This would require Russia to give back all of the territory it has taken from Ukraine over the past decade. The Kremlin is strongly against this, insisting that in order for negotiations to take place, Kyiv must accept the new territorial reality of Ukraine. On Monday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that discussions with the African delegation would continue. Mr. Ramaphosa claims that his delegation opened the door for future talks even though they were unable to bring the two sides of the conflict together. Mr. Ramaphosa may have been trying to play up a win on the international stage in light of his domestic problems, which include crumbling infrastructure, regular blackouts, and growing discontent with his government. This diplomatic mission has not yielded a successful outcome for him,